Hi everybody, my name is Scott Alford. I'm coming to you from my living room / home office in Gainesville, Florida. And today I'm going to be talking about some of my research that I've been conducting around Cedar Key. So I am a third-year Ph.D. student in the Fisheries and Aquatic Sciences Ph.D. program here at the University of Florida. I primarily work out at the Nature Coast Biological Station under Dr. Charlie Martin, which is this guy right here, if you see him around the station. And the focus of my research is on estuarine community ecology and how estuarine fish and crustaceans react to changes in salinity. So just kind of put all that in context. Your state of Florida, we're there where Gatorhead is, of course. And Cedar Key is right here in the Big Bend. This is where the Suwannee River enters the Gulf of Mexico. So just to continue to put this photo in context, up here at the top is the mouth of the Suwannee, so the east and west passes, and the Cedar Keys are around the middle of the estuary. So estuaries are where rivers meet the sea. So this creates mixing of riverine freshwater with marine saltwater. And this is a highly dynamic process, and we can break this down into different zones depending on the dynamic of that salinity. So up estuary is going to be where you have the most river influence. This is going to generally be the lowest salinity, so because of the high amount of fresh water that goes into the estuary, versus the low estuary, you're going to have higher salinities because this is the most marine influenced area, with high mixing in the middle of the estuary. So like in context of the Swan, it sounds like around Cabbage Reef, because this is where you have pretty much equal contributions of river input and marine input that creates kind of a moderate average salinity, but high variation around that salinity. And what that does as far as fish and crustaceans goes, tends to create different communities, so just assemblages of different species determined by their physiological tolerance or preference for salinity. So up estuary where you have lower salinity, so more fresh water, you may see things like largemouth bass, sunfishes, and gar. Whereas further down estuary, you may see things that are more marine, so things like bonnethead sharks, some different snapper and grouper species, pigfish, etc. But in the middle of the estuary, you have these quote-unquote brackish species, or what I'm going to call euryhaline species for the rest of this talk. So these are species with very broad salinity tolerances that can also tolerate high variation salinity. So things like snook that we have here in Florida, redfish, blue crabs, etc., that can traverse the entire estuary and can tolerate from freshwater conditions all the way to marine conditions, and are going to use the estuary in during different life stages and during different times of the year. And what this does is it gets researchers like me curious about how these animals are going to react to changes in salinity and how that changes their interactions with each other. So I use research from the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission to look at changes in estuarine communities through time in relation to salinity. And then I also have an experiment set up underneath the Nature Coast Biological Station. So if you've been down in our wet lab and you see a setup that looks something like this is my experiment. So what this experiment does, it looks at the non-consumptive effects of different predators associated with different estuarine zones on prey species, and then also looks at the potential effect of salinity on that interaction. So predators in general have two types of effects on prey. So they can have a direct effect where this is direct mortality from the predator. So this is where a predator removes a prey individual from the population or from the system just by consumption. So that prey can no longer function within that system, carrying out functions such as feeding or defending territory, etc. The other type of effect that a predator can have is an indirect effect or a non-consumptive effect. So this is where the predator does not actually eat a prey individual, but the prey individual can perceive risk associated with the predator, so it fears the predator, and it ceases its normal function. So it changes behavior and is no longer feeding, or is no longer, maybe modifying its habitat or defending the territory, etc. So this experiment exposes prey to two different types of predator cues. So visual cues, so being able to see the predator, and olfactory cues, so being able to smell the predator, and also changes salinity to look at changes in prey behavior in response to those cues, and then to see if the physiological stress from changes in salinity alters that behavior and potentially puts that prey at higher risk. So for the prey, I'm using Gulf killifish. So these are mud minnows I've collected around Cedar Key. And for the predators, I'm using redfish or red drum that are a common estuarine predator that these killifish are definitely going to be exposed to on a regular basis. And then I'm also using largemouth bass, which is the upper end of the estuary, that these killifish may rarely encounter or only encounter in different or certain periods of the year. So the behavior that I'm looking for in these guys, I'm looking for shelter-seeking behavior in response to these predator cues. So if they can see or smell the predator, I would expect for them to go into cover versus maybe just being out in the open. And our preliminary results indicate that is the case. But the interesting thing is, if they can see the predator, they seem to come out of the cover a little bit sooner, as compared to if they can only smell the predator. And so far, we haven't really seen any effects of salinity on this behavior, which isn't surprising since killifish can tolerate almost any salinity. The goal of my research is to better inform us on how these organisms are going to respond to changes in salinity, and how those changes in salinity may affect our natural resources such as fisheries stocks in the future. So that's all I have for you today. I hope that you enjoyed the video, and thank you for your time.